My name is Amber Stearns, and this is my presentation for Intercultural Communication for Educators. The essay that we are going to discuss is Culture and Communication in the Classroom, written by Geneva Gay. And a quote by Geneva Gay is, "While caring about conveys feelings of concern for one's state of being, caring for is active engagement in doing something to positively affect it." I'd first like to go over a brief introduction of what we'll be discussing about the definition of culture, communication, and how they affect and impact education. So first, a brief introduction. How do culture, communication, and education relate to each other? Well, the relationship between how people in different cultures communicate and educate their students is very important. Bruner stated in 1996 that learning and thinking are always situated in a cultural setting and always depend on cultural resources. But to fully understand this relationship, we need to know about each of the parts. So, what is culture? Culture provides the tools to pursue the search for meaning and convey our understanding to others. It can be customs, art, social institutions, and achievements of a nation, a people, or a group. What is communication? Well, communication can be verbal, nonverbal, written, or visual. It is how we interact and express ourselves. Societies and cultures can have high or low communication, and each individual has a propensity to being an outgoing person and able to verbally communicate well, or an introverted person and maybe using more nonverbal communication to express themselves to others. And finally, education. How do culture and communication impact education for our students? According to Mrs. Gay in her essay, education could not exist without culture and communication. The very heart of education is communicating information to others. Culture impacts the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of education. There are culturally different discourse structures in every educational situation. And amongst those structures, there are ethnic variations in communication style. Typically in the United States, the structure is a passive receptive structure, which means that the students sit quietly at a desk, they face forward, they listen to the teacher. The teacher communicates information, and when it's appropriate, he or she will allow students to respond. Any interaction is always based on what is acceptable by the teacher, and the students are more of an audience. There is also a structure called the participatory interactive structure, which is more typically utilized in African American cultures and is sometimes also known as the call and response. Often, this is where one person has the floor and is sharing information, but instead of waiting to grant someone the opportunity to speak, there is an emotional and fluid reaction that makes students able to express themselves and respond back quickly and throughout the conversation. Native Hawaiians utilize another structure that's called a talk story or a co-narrative. It involves several students working together to talk, to create a story, to share information, or to complete a learning task. And not all of it is individual, but there's a group performance or speaking aspect. And there is a communicative practice involved here in which the students are telling a story, but also in many European American females, a strategy or a structure called cooperative overlapping has begun to take place. It's where the audience or the other participants talk along with the speaker in order to show participation and support. They're more often the audience than the speaker, but they utilize this structure in order to establish friendships, relationships, exhibit power, and negotiate closeness, as well as to avoid conflict. In many different cultures, there are styles of inquiry and responding that are different from what we see most often in the classroom. So, most common right now is the teacher will ask a question and will give information, and the students will then offer up some kind of a response. In many Latino structures, there's more learning in collective groups instead of just individuals working on their own. They find that this way they're able to share student language and experiences and also problem solve and be more engaged in tasks. As far as organizing the ideas in discourse, it depends on the type of discourse that's taking place, and how that is expressed is influenced by culture and by the performance of students in schools. In topic-centered discourse, the speaker focuses on one issue at a time, arranges facts in a linear order, makes connections, and then the structure, content, and delivery is very closely parallel in expository and descriptive writing, and it's commonly used in schools, most often in journalistic writing. Storytelling as a topic chaining discourse happens most often in African American structures. This includes relating information, persuading others to support the speaker's point of view, networking, exercising power, etc. Often, it takes some time for them to get to the point because they're orchestrating a cast of contributors. This often happens around special holidays where stories are being told and information is being passed down generationally. This also gives different opportunities for taking positions and presenting the self. So, how, for example, when Native Americans have a strong conviction to fundamental and significant linkages amongst their culture, they're better able to express their ideas. But we've found that their cultural traditions are usually presented in indirect and holistic communication, shared with the form of wisdom from the past and presenting their positions and their self in a more folkloric way. Other ethnic variations in communication style would be personalizing or objectifying communication, playing with and on words, as well as ambivalence and distancing in communication. Playing on words would be using a specific cadence or speech delivery, as well as different patterns of language. Different examples would be public issues that could be explored and using a framework that will enable and facilitate people to be able to understand or visualize the illustrations and the poetic flavor of playing with words. The ambivalence and distancing in communication is something that takes place more often in many Asian and Asian American students, where they sit in virtually silent classrooms with little to no discussion. There's often their demeanor is very quiet. They are not allowed to participate and rather sit back quietly and are not involved in the conversation. We found that there's also a difference in the way females communicate versus the way males communicate. Female communication styles, women are more likely to talk to other women when they have a problem or need to make a decision. Women are more relationship oriented and look for commonalities and ways to connect with other women. Women focus on building rapport by sharing experiences and asking questions. And if women have a disagreement with each other, it affects all aspects of their relationship. Women get things done by working and building relationships. The gender differences between the way females and males communicate are very significant. Men tend to relate to each other in a more of a one up, one down situation. So one would have to be stronger or more dominant than the other. And status and dominance is very important in male communication. Men like to tell and give information rather than ask questions. So they're less likely to show that they don't have the answer, and they share experiences as more of a way of being one up. When men have a disagreement, they're more likely to move on to another subject. It doesn't impact all aspects of their relationship. And men build relationships while they are working on tasks with each other versus building relationships emotionally. There are gender variations in discourse styles as well. The way that females communicate differently from males establishes gender communication patterns early in life. There are problems with gendered communication styles, which usually take place between men and women. Storytelling as a topic chaining discourse topics and strategies for referent tracking. So while storytelling as a way of connecting topics during a discussion or during an educational opportunity can be impacted by the voice that the person is using, the obviation, the inversion, switch reference markers, and pronominalization. These are different communication styles that will impact how much a student is able to absorb, how the student absorbs their information, the level of interest, and the level of connections that the students can make to prior learning. Here is Geneva Gay discussing different cultural elements in her own words.
What we can talk about is that any culture has some core features. Anthropologists might call them natal characteristics. And those are kind of the nuggets. And then there are varying degrees of elaborations. Another way we can think about it is what are the fundamental, and I find it curious that some people always talk about essentializing as if that's totally a negative thing. Everything has some essential dimensions to it in the sense that it's the more core kinds of things. And then you have varying degrees of elaboration. So I think issues like racial identity, age, gender, education, regionality, socioeconomic status, to me, these are variables that have an impact on how the core features of a given culture are manifested in expressed behavior. So if I were to use myself as a case example, as an African American, and I look at my family, I have one sibling, and my mother and my sibling and I, plus some others, grew up in our early years with my grandmother. So I need to include my grandmother as my primary family unit, what might be called the nuclear family. But when you look at us, we are somewhat in different layers and on different places in the continuum of African American culture.
So, in conclusion,
What we can talk about.
The impact that communication and culture have on education is dramatic. It can be not only influenced by a person's ethnic background, by their gender, by whatever affiliations socially, personally, or individually someone connects or feels related to, can be impacted. And since communication is essential to teaching and learning, it's most important that teachers in any classroom structure take note and consider the background and the culture and the communication styles of their students in order to maintain and provide the best education possible.